Money is the new God. A lot of people seem to equate money to morality in some way. Either that the rich are really immoral, or maybe they think that to be moral you have to have money. Then you can do these great giant acts of generosity, right? Whatever it is, people seem to equate money to morality in some way, even though I don't think that there could be any scientific evidence that they're correlated. A lot of people on the left especially seem to argue that there's some correlation between the way that a psychopath could operate the system versus the way that a normal person could operate the system. And there's a little bit of validity to that. But there's also an element where I think a psychopath would reach a lot of challenges that somebody else wouldn't. We seem to think, well, if I had more money, then I could be a better person. But when they have more money, they're going to be a worse person. And that seems to be the mentality. And how ironic is that, right? It's interesting because we used to kind of be all about freedom in America. We were founded as the land of the free. It wasn't until the late 1800s that we started talking about the American dream, and that became kind of a focus. Maybe even before that, the shift kind of changed. We were less about our liberties and our freedoms and more about making money. And I think that has to be like a correlation between that and depression, you know? There's definitely no correlation between money and happiness. That's for sure. That's proven. It's proven that once you have $75,000 a year, so you're not anxious about paying your bills and you can afford a nice little house and food, at that point, any excess money beyond that isn't going to make you any happier. You're not going to get more dopamine out of it. The thing is that I think a lot of people who are really successful get out of it is pride, or like some sort of sense of superiority. And there's no doubt that they get dopamine out of that. And that, I think, is a huge issue in our country, is pride. I think that causes a lot of division. I think we've got people on the left that get really prideful about their education, which makes people that are on the right feel really resentful and misunderstood. And then they get really prideful about their work ethic and things like that. And it kind of creates this horrible divide, right? Where it's like really a very toxic situation on both ends because of the pride element. Rather than like looking at the world and we just say, wow, I am so thankful, right? Because that's the opposite of pride, is appreciating, right? I'm so appreciative that there's people doing these things, that there's people that see the world this way so that these things can get done. It's not the way I see the world, but I appreciate that there's people in it doing that. And I think if we started looking at the world in this way, maybe there would be a little less pride. And that way you have this kind of appreciation where there doesn't need to be this really intense conflict. If you're resenting somebody that's on a different spectrum of personality than you, then you've got a little bit of pride. And you know, the other thing that's funny is sometimes you'll talk to somebody, this isn't everybody, but you'll talk to somebody and they'll say, yes, the Republicans are like that, or yes, the Democrats are like that. It's like, I don't think you're hearing me. I think you're reiterating my point. There are studies that show that the mind and the perception and resentment, and people will resent somebody who's better educated than them because they don't feel like they can become more intelligent. But people won't resent somebody who's richer than them because in theory or in a fantasy, they believe that they could be that rich. This leads to some interesting problems, you know, between the political parties, because you've got a lot of people who fantasize about being wealthy and a lot of people take a lot of pride in being intelligent, and then that creates a lot of division as well, I think, especially between the right and the left. But in the end, the root cause of these things is the pride. And the thing that we don't realize, and the reason that we cling to the pride, is that we don't realize, we think, maybe I am proud, maybe I do think I'm better than the opposite political party. And then we think like, well, that's what we need. We don't realize the person who's suffering from that isn't them, you know, they're suffering from their own pride. You're suffering from your own pride. The person who suffers is you from your pride, from your attachment to your ego. Another study that I thought was interesting, I listened to a lot of podcasts, the study that showed that people aren't really going to resent you if you make a lot of money if they know that you work really hard. If they think that you're making a lot of money and not working hard, understandably, that creates a lot of resentment. If they think you make a lot of money and you're like a good person and you work hard, it's kind of Cain and Abel, you know? You don't want to be Cain. You're not going to go stab the guy because he's a good person, he works hard, and he gets a lot of benefits. And maybe that's too much outward looking. It could be the pride of saying, I think I know enough about this person's life to judge them, and I think I know enough about my life that I should get more, right? And that I somehow deserve more. I mean, that seems like that's a lot of pride, but it's also outward looking and it's comparative thinking. And that is a horrible thing about social media, one of many. Just look up psychology studies of social media. It's twisted. Like even then, I'm like, oh, I got somebody sent me a message, you know? It's like, you know? It's really bad. It's like that addictive that I'm illustrating a point and I'm still being sucked into it, right? So these studies have shown, like, when you're looking at your phone. Now, there's so many things that even just come out of this one study. When you look at your phone and you see somebody on your phone, your brain lights up as if they're in the room. We don't even need to go into the ideas of some of the more taboo elements of looking at things on your phone. But we can just go into the ideas of social media. If you see somebody who's super successful, that's a celebrity, that is like basking it up, having a great time, you think that they're in the same area as you on some emotional, deep, animalistic level. You can't tell the difference. This has been shown to be true. It's like your brain is lighting up that way and you respond that way emotionally. That's what's causing a lot of anxiety and depression disorders right now, is that people aren't aware. They're kind of just mindlessly going through their phone and then they feel really depressed afterwards, right? Because it's like, wow, why do I feel so bad? Well, it's because you just saw a bunch of people having a really good time. This is another part of the study that it showed was your brain is hardwired to look at your neighbors in your area and see how they're doing and keep track of that, right? The people who are near you, you're keeping track of their resources, how they're doing. Like, are they getting food? Are they getting water? You know, like we're very animalistic, really. And you look around and if they're getting a lot more food or water than you, then there's an element where you're like, okay, I need to learn what they're doing. I'm either like a total failure of my species or they are just like stealing. There's some horrible thing happening emotionally, right? You just know there's some terrible thing because we're all living in the same area. We should have the same access to resources and they are thriving and I'm failing. That's what happens emotionally in our brain, like subconsciously and emotionally. That could lead to horrible, horrible demoralization. You feel really hopeless, you get really depressed, right? And you don't really know why. We look at the money and we look at the situations and we feel like we could be in that situation. That's the key. Whereas we couldn't, right? We don't know that they're actually in that situation, right? Because it's a doctored photo on Instagram. Intellectually, we maybe understand that, but emotionally, we don't. So we don't even know if they're really living that life. B, though, equally important, they're not in the same situation as you. They're not in the same town or the same room. They're not in the same situation, so they don't have the same opportunities at all, which is really what your brain's scanning for, is the opportunities in your area and the people in your area and how you're doing in relation to them. That's what your brain scans. So when you're looking out to like the internet, then it becomes really crazy. You could do an entire thing on social media. I mean, it's a great discussion to be having. It's a huge problem. I think it's one of the biggest problems facing the world right now, especially our generation as millennials, a generational addiction, and it's going to be a tough one for anybody to kick, and it's going to cause a lot of psychological disorders. There's another element of like, you're going through this depression because of this social media, right? And then you see all these people happy, and it's like, that's not bothering them. So there's something really relieving about reading those studies and saying, oh, you're not alone. Fear of missing out was caused because if everybody's going off on a hunt to go get food, then you would go with because of fear of missing out, right? Because you see them going off to get resources, you are hardwired to go with. But when you see them going off and getting resources on your phone or living their best life on your phone, you can't go with, and that creates this horrible, like your instinct is working against you because it's saying go with, and you're like, I can't, I want to, I can't, and it creates this horrible thing. I mean, there's no way that's good for you. Pulling it back around, so we're tying money to happiness, which is proven to be untrue. If you've got a family and you're making $75K, that's the height of your emotional well-being that's going to come from money. We also equate it to morality, which really, I think it's a non sequitur. That's just something that Tony Robbins has said, is that it's an amplifier. Money, if you're a generous person, you'll be more generous. If you're stingy, you'll be more stingy. If you're whatever you are, if you're angry or abusive, you'll be more angry and abusive. If you're happy and loving, you'll be more happy and loving. You know, whatever it is, it can amplify your actions just because you've got so much weight to your actions. It just adds weight. So if you want to become wealthy, one thing that maybe would be a good idea is to start working on yourself, psychologically breaking that down. A, why do you want to be wealthy? B, what aspects of yourself do you need to work on before you should even be trusted with that kind of responsibility? Because you don't want to become one of those monsters. Ultimately, those people are unhappy as heck, man. So if you're unhappy and you're already unhappy and you're resentful and you're already resentful, well then instantly you know you shouldn't have any money. If you're resentful of the rich, you shouldn't have any money because you'll only become more unhappy and resentful once you get more money. Studies of people who are really wealthy, and some of them are just workaholics, and some of them are incredibly unhealthy and incredibly stressed out constantly. If you get wealthy, you don't want to be in that state of mind because it's only going to be like worse for you. It's going to make your life worse. So instead, maybe try to find fulfillment in your life now. So that then when you do make money, if that really remains one of your heightened goals, which I mean, there's no reason that it shouldn't. If you're really healthy and you can make a bunch of money, that's great. It'll amplify some of the positive things you can do for the world. But I think that we focus so much on the money as a solution rather than an amplifier. And even as an amplifier, it's not necessary. We used to idolize people who served our community, but more and more we're critical of people who serve our community. And we idolize people who are wealthy. Yeah, we need to keep people in check who are in service to our community. You know, like I'm thinking police officers, firemen, things like that. We need to keep them in check. But there is also an element where we should idolize people for things that they do, like serving a community, like a janitor. I'm so glad that this place that I'm at doesn't look like shit right now. I'm really glad that somebody cleaned it. You know, if I realistically was being paid to do it, I know from having jobs that I'm not very good at that. And so whenever I go somewhere and it's clean, I'm like, wow, I feel really like thankful to be in a clean space, you know? We lose sight of just what keeps a community stable. If we're in a building and we're always just trying to make the building bigger, it's going to lean and tower over, right? It's just going to collapse. We need maintenance on that building on every floor. There's so many elements where things will start breaking, and we need people just taking care of the building that we have now, not necessarily building it bigger. And those are the people that we should be giving so much respect to. If we learn as a community to respect each other in that way, I think a lot of the polarizing and the division that's happening in terms of politics will start to diffuse, because we start to just respect and admire each other for our differences, right? And for what we're bringing to the community. And we realize that just because I'm a doctor and you're a cleaner doesn't mean that I'm better or more important to the community to you. I will not be able to survive without you, and you will not be able to survive without me. So we need to just have a mutual fucking respect. Because as long as somebody feels elevated, then somebody's going to get resentful, and they're going to elevate. Because there's reasons that we can each elevate. There's reasons we can feel prideful, right? There's always reasons, because there's always something like, yeah, well, I'm doing this thing that you wouldn't do. Oh, well, I'm doing this. Well, I know about this, and you don't even know that I know about this. Well, I know about this, and you do know I know about this. And it's just this infinite battle that will never go anywhere, and it'll only polarize us. So the more that we pull together and just respect each other, the easier it'll be. That's the pride that's really healthy, is I'm contributing in a way that I can to my community. That brings you a lot of joy, and that's a really healthy thing. And then there's also pride in looking around at others that are contributing, everybody else in the community that's providing even the same services, even our competitors, but they do it in a different way. And you think, wow, I am so prideful that I'm in this community that has all of these cool things happening. What a cool thing that is. That's where I get my source of pride, right? Is by my community. I think that can be really healthy. We got to remember that we get unhappy when we don't cultivate these things. We get unhappy when we start feeling the opposite way. So being grateful and appreciative of others is good to yourself only. Being resentful and trying to take down others is bad for yourself only. There's no other reason to stop. That's just how it is. It's clear cut. And when you think of it biologically, it makes a lot of sense that that would take place, right? Because you're in a community, you need to survive. So biologically, you're going to be a lot more rewarded if you feel like you're in a great community and you're contributing to that community, because that's your mission in life. That's what you're here to do, you know. Going a little Darwinistic with that, you know, it's not just to procreate, it's also to keep the community going and to be in this community and to appreciate your community as much as you can. That's just like hardwired into your nervous system, and doing the opposite is going to make you just stress the hell out. And in this society, again, with the social media, we look through our phones and we see, and it becomes like, well, my community sucks. Because look at Kim Kardashian's community, my neighbor that I see sometimes. Emotionally in your brain. You know, these studies are amazing. Google it. The psychology studies on social media. It's unbelievable, this stuff. The way that we really can't tell the difference between somebody on our phone and somebody in person. And you can draw so many conclusions from that. We could do so many discussions about just that idea, but there's so much more. There's so many more studies that come out, you know, new disorders, all sorts of fucked up shit, man, that all just comes from this state of like our technology has evolved faster than our biology. What a good question. What a great discussion to start with. Is money God now? Is money goodness? We kind of equate them. Money is power. Money is all these things. We kind of create that. We decide that. Make sure that you're in a healthy space so that when you get it, I think there's some way that the community is hardwired where you won't necessarily get it unless you do cultivate some of those things. So that's one reason, but also you're going to enjoy it and not actually have all your negative shit amplified. And then you're going to find out that you're creating your own hell. Amplify your heaven, not your hell. I guess that's all I got today. Let's hear some of these discussions. Chat me up. Hit me some comments. Yeah.